Hello and welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, the ultimate resource for HR insights and guidance that will empower both seasoned business professionals and eager job seekers. I'm HR Kyle, your host. I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. In each episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of HR management, uncovering strategies that can transform the way you approach talent acquisition, employee engagement, and workplace dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned HR pro navigating the ever-evolving landscape of human resources or a job seeker striving to land your dream position, this podcast is your compass. Our mission is simple: to provide you with actionable knowledge, expert interviews, and inspiring stories that will help you thrive in the world of HR. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to take your HR game to the next level. Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, where HR meets success. Hello and welcome, folks. You're tuned in to the HR Kyle podcast, where we delve into the intricate world of human resources, leadership, and everything in between. I'm your host, HR Kyle, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Now, on today's agenda, we have an incredibly important topic lined up: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. Now, these aren't just buzzwords. They're essential elements for creating a thriving and inclusive organizational culture. Now, in our first segment, we'll be joined by a seasoned professional, Danielle. And Danielle serves as Director of Corporate Partnerships for an organization dedicated to empowering high-achieving students of color from underprivileged backgrounds, ensuring they have the support and resources to excel in top colleges and meaningful careers. In our second segment, we'll be joined by a seasoned HR professional, Dawn, who brings a wealth of experience in HR and talent acquisition. Now, Dawn will shed light on the significance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in today's workplace landscape. So get ready to dive deep into these crucial topics with our insightful guests. And without further ado, let's kick off our first segment and welcome Danielle to the show. Danielle, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's truly an honor to have you on the HR Kyle podcast.
Hi, Kyle. Thank you so much. Really appreciate taking the time to have me on this awesome platform.
Well, you are very welcome. We're looking forward to this discussion tonight. Now, Danielle, I always like to start off easy and then make the questions get incredibly hard after this. So the easy question is, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that's always fun, right? So I'm a mom, first and foremost, to two incredible little boys, a little 5-year-old kindergartner and 8-year-old second grader. And then I have two bonus boys who are a 9-year-old third grader and a 13-year-old going on 24 seventh grader. And then I have a slew of fur children. So basically what I like to say to folks is there's a ton of heartbeats in my house. It's always active, which is fun. But I'm engaged to love of my life. We're getting married in November, which is super exciting. And then the other little bit I always like to share is I just love helping others. And at the end of the day, just living a good, enriching life and just really enjoy everyone and everything in my life. And I'm very blessed.
Danielle, that's wonderful. And if we were giving awards for introducing yourself and doing such a nice job about it, you would certainly win that award. And just the picture that you paint is a wonderful picture of you and your family. And by the way, congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I'm excited for you. Well, Danielle, and you alluded to this a little bit, but if I were to summarize your career, the theme that runs throughout is this concept of giving back. Tell us where that comes from and why that's so important to you.
So yeah, everything that I do in my life, I need to be able to give back. So I started my career in Washington, D.C. because I loved the city, the town, the energy. I graduated with a marketing degree from Kent State University, go Golden Flashes. But I had an interest in politics because I studied abroad while I was in college as a sophomore in Switzerland, learning about international politics from the European lens. I learned a lot in the years that I was in DC, but unfortunately mostly about what I didn't like about that career path and what it seemed to bring out of people. You would hope the politics in our world would make the best of people, but unfortunately that's not really what I saw. So understanding what wasn't for me, I really began to think about, what do I want to do? And even though I didn't love my career, I did work for some excellent leaders, but I also worked for some really bad ones. So I was able to learn the importance of giving back in the context of career within the workplace, but also to our communities and in our overall world. So that's been my running theme. I've been an underdog in my life. I've experienced, like we all do, some really, really hard stuff in life. But along with every hard situation, I listened to Mr. Rogers and I always found my helpers. So I I tell people that no matter what, we're humans and life's going to have its hard moments, but kind of like in baking, you don't really appreciate the sweetness of things unless there's a little bit of salt. That's why you put a little bit of salt on your chocolate chip cookies to make them better. Try it if you have it. That's the same thing with life. So even though I've had some really hard situations, the sweet really offsets that, especially when you can help others. So, along with that theme of wanting to help others, it's kind of like a life lesson. You can choose to allow hard things to keep you down, or you can use those experiences as leverage to lifting yourself up and finding better for you and those around you. And then I promise everyone's life will be richer if you choose that latter approach. And, giving back is really the sweetest way to do that.
Danielle, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know our audience who's listening in tonight, there's a lot of wisdom in what you shared there. And just coming back to that theme of giving back, the world has a way of giving to us the more we give back. And my mom always said, you can't outgive the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lot of what you're speaking about there.
100%.
So another common denominator in your background is a strong focus on the arts and sciences and working with members of the community to support the efforts of your organizations. Can you tell us more about those efforts and the impacts you've been able to have?
Yeah, no. So starting in like the political area, which I've already addressed, I would say my background is arts and sciences, but really human services, which is really a beautiful blend of arts and sciences, in my opinion. So after politics, I went and worked for the American Red Cross. I had relocated from DC to Central Ohio, and it was just a beautiful matchup with my DC experience and my desire to give back to a nonprofit. And I had a blast with those I worked with. That's one of the best managers that I've ever had. His name's Steve. I'm going to send this to him and let him know that I mentioned him in this podcast. An incredible woman hired me and gave me a chance, not having a traditional nonprofit background. And they both really made me into a not only a great employee, but a great individual. But it allowed me to see a direct correlation between fundraising for a mission and on behalf of an organization and how it directly impacts those communities that you serve. There's no better organization to think about in giving back to the community than the Red Cross. You see them all the time with disaster responses, but they're in our everyday communities all the time that I still don't think a lot of people really understand how much the Red Cross really helps on a day-to-day basis. So that was really inspiring for me to be able to work for that organization. Then I moved over to a national service dog organization, which is a little bit different. It gave me a lot of different perspective, a bigger geographical footprint when I worked for them. Again, worked with just some phenomenal people in a great organization and helped a lot of really deserving individuals and was really able to work with corporations and engaging their companies and their employees and helping them give back. Because that is a theme I'm seeing in more and more corporations. Yes, there's a component of it helps with employee retention. We all know, and retention of employees is a lot more of a better investment on your employee base. But really, companies do want to they care and they want to give back to where their employees care about. So those are kind of the relationships that I had formed as employee resource group, navigation, partnerships, and then dealing with individual donors as well. But after that career, I realized I had my two babies and I needed to move closer to home. So I relocated to Northern Ohio, which is where my whole family for the most part lives. And I decided to go work for my alma mater in higher education, which was incredibly different than a nonprofit perspective in a really cool and unique way. And in my almost 5 years there, I was able to work for the College of Arts and Sciences and working with alumni and individuals that wanted to make an impact in the future generation. And a lot of that work was setting up scholarship support or investing in existing funding that would help in research, and just being able to understand how the core of a university is, not only in the community it lives and breathes and serves, but those who go to school there, and the pride that they have and the experiences that they have while there, myself included. And was able to move around the university. COVID obviously was a huge impact on what I was doing, but I worked with some fantastic people, absolutely wholeheartedly amazing individuals that really worked with me as I navigated some tough life situations while I was there. A lot of people think that when you're in fundraising or kind of doing this work, a lot of it's for credit. They attribute fundraising to sales, and it's kind of there. It's definitely the same skill set. But what I often find, and those similar to me in these roles, they're not really doing it for credit or bonuses. You're just skilled at strategizing relationships and navigating where two parties can come together for the greater good. So I do my work to help raise necessary funds to help organizations do the work that is so crucial in their communities, but really how to help the greater good. And, I will tell you, some of those situations were brutal. The pandemic was some to explain away, which I'm sure we all have our pandemic horror stories. That's also in my personal life completely blew up. And I was able to have a manager come in and take care of me as a person over an employee. So that kind of brought home, how one should treat another in an employment workplace. And then I was able to move on and have a both really positive aligned with a really negative experience in my last position at the university. And was able to learn a lot and grow individually. And be surrounded by some really good people who I'm close with today still, and learned how our students should be treated, how we should have a certain level of expectation of this next generation, and how they operate and they think, and they need to give back, and they need to be professional, but also understand work-life balance. This next generation is shockingly amazing, and they're going to really change our world in the best way possible. So having the opportunity to engage with them from that college's perspective was really beautiful, but it also allowed me to better understand the world of engineering, the world of aeronautics, and all the other nuances that kind of happen, and really what it takes to find and work for really good people who really care about you as a human being, and also how not to treat people in a professional environment. It was a huge growing opportunity. I needed lots of chocolate chip cookies because at times there was lots of salt. But at the end of the day, my helpers were there too, and just kind of helped give back. And even in negative situations, I still walked away with more positive than negative.
No, wonderful story, and thank you for walking us through that. And there's so much to be gleaned from that. I talk often about life being a team game, and you certainly hit on that. But the other thing that I always want to make sure our listeners hear is your career journey. And yours, again,
Mm-hmm.
is not one of those that's linear. It has
No,
its twists and turns, and personal things happen and so on. But here you are sitting here today, enjoying a very successful and enriching career. So if you're the person out there listening right now that's maybe struggling through a transition, I think Danielle sets a wonderful example to say, stick with it. As she said, look for the helpers around you. You will get through this.
absolutely.
Danielle, in your current role, you're very much an advocate for students underrepresented in engineering fields. And as I've shared many times, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, I firmly believe that those of us who have quote unquote made it, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, have a responsibility to help others reach their goals and aspirations, and especially those who face some extra challenges in doing so. Can you share more about your current work and why you believe it's so important in the sciences?
Absolutely. So when I decided I needed to find a new career due to personal reasons, and really wanted to work from home, and that was really the transition story when I was trying to understand next steps. I was also it's a hiatus right now, but I was in the middle of getting my master's degree, and Kent State offers an absolutely amazing master's program in higher education. It's the cultural foundations of education. And in my coursework, it was a lot of understanding of our educational systems today, kind of where did our educational theories maybe come from? Where did they start with? The gaps in education, where's the sense of belonging? And there's a lot of gaps with, I will say, non-white males in our educational system. If you think about where a lot of the theories kind of had their foundations, it's based in the early 1900s educational system. Who was getting education, which was more privileged white males. And that's a very generalized comment, but really I learned a lot about how our many educational systems in this country fail so many of our students to no fault of their own. It's just through privilege and lack of access and lack of resources. We are doing a disparagingly poor amount of work in helping the entire generation of learners in our country. So when I came around this role, I did not know about Thrive Scholars, which is where I work. And upon some research, it is very literally doing the work that all my coursework was teaching me. Our generation, our community, our country, our systems, whatever you want to put in there, are highlighting as a need for so many people in our country. And I was dumbfounded. Oh my goodness, this actually exists. In a nutshell, this organization, its mission is to provide high achieving students of color from economically under-resourced communities, provide them those opportunities they need to thrive at top colleges and in meaningful careers. So the way I always describe this organization and the work that I'm doing particularly is building partnerships with companies that are in need of engineering students, technology students, etc. It's really when you think about an under-resourced high school, for instance, inner city, or a community that just doesn't have a lot to help support its entire student base, the students we're really trying to serve are those that are at the top of those classes. They are valedictorians, top 10, what have you. A lot of that school's resources are targeted towards just getting most of those kids to graduate. And that top segment of student is assumed to be fine because they're graduating top of the class. They will likely get into college. They'll be good. They'll be good. They'll be fine. And then the reality is, oftentimes they're BIPOC individuals. So many times they're first generation. So many times they come from really under-resourced homes and communities, and there's a lot going on at home. And the resources at school, well, there's not that many that help get into college because that's not where the majority of the student body is going. So looking at these amazing individuals who should be able to find their way easily into college because they've earned it, they get good grades, they work hard, they volunteer, they should do those things. They don't have the resources and the tools that more privileged counterparts do. Family and friends able to help them navigate getting into college, what that all looks like, what programs should they be considering, what careers should they be looking at, how are they able to fund this? FAFSA forms. They don't have the people in their lives that so many others do to get into where they already have earned a spot into. And I think that's really important is these students work hard. And so why I'm really passionate about this, I've learned about it, I've seen it, I understand it, and I have a voice as a white individual who is able to not understand the challenges that our amazing students go through, but I have a way to use my skills and my talent and my interests to help form partnerships that can turn into investments, that can get them into our program to not only fund the work that we're doing, which is crucial. Our students we name them scholars, that they come through our programs, they don't pay for anything. And more importantly, other than all those things that I just mentioned, which are incredibly important and impactful, but we also are doing this work to help educate, get into their minds a little bit earlier on, hey, you're going to college for a reason, right? You don't just go for a good time, maybe, but you're going to be able to find a career that is wonderful and sustainable and can really help financially support you and your family and your community. And the earlier we can provide any sort of resources, education, information, what have you, the better they're able to advocate for themselves once they get into college and they're able to find internships that, again, they have already earned because they are exceptional students who have the skills that many employers want. But if I can come in and say, I understand what's going on, maybe not from a firsthand perspective, but you know what? I've seen too many students struggle unnecessarily and get to a place where so many others who just have more resources to them, to no fault of either party. It's the nature of where they're brought up and the resources provided to them in their communities. I'm going to do what I can to help this amazing group of students get to where their more privileged counterparts are able to get to because they have the resources that these students don't. And it goes back to finding the helpers. And it goes back to understanding that the engineering and technology areas, this is loose and nuanced, knowing that each of those areas are very different within each of those segments. But there's a huge need for hiring in engineering spaces. And these companies that I talk to all the time, they want more diverse hiring in their hiring candidates within their hiring funnels. They're just not there. They're trying to actively diversify their teams because so many of these individual companies do their own research and their own reporting. There's others out there in the communities that show more diverse teams are more profitable. They have better problem solving capabilities. The teams are healthier to be on because they collaborate and they work better together because they come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. And that comes into the workplace. And then problems are solved differently and quicker. Solutions are brought up that may never have been brought into a space when different people are able to have a conversation around a common denominator. It's fantastic to see it. So if I'm able to help educate and say, hey, with a mechatronics degree or with a mechanical engineering degree or an aerospace degree, let's have these companies talk to you about what realistically this career could look like for you and open their eyes to opportunities they may never have known about. They may never have thought possible. They may never have even approached because they had no idea how to do it. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll go in there and I'll form partnerships that can help those individuals have the best chance for success because they're already working hard. So why not give them a leg up in a way that many others, home villages and communities and families are able to do?
Well, Danielle, I can attest firsthand that you are absolutely making a difference. And the other thing that I think we have to realize in the work that you're doing, you're making generational differences. You're not only affecting the generation that you're working with, but you're changing the entire trajectory of that family cycle or that family process going forward. I can assure you, and I'm sure you realize that as well, because as you position the generation you're working with now in a better spot, that's impacting future generations of that family as well. It's guaranteed that's what's happening. So you're changing the trajectory of that entire family.
And thank you for that. And I really do appreciate that. I like to say these students are. We know there's generational wealth issues
Mm-hmm.
that so many have seen for generations, obviously. One of the reasons why this organization likes to talk in terms of meaningful careers, high trajectory careers, is to continue that because you're absolutely right. Something that these students have to think about is their first generation, either Americans or I should say college graduates. They have a whole community they need to support financially in some ways. And so they're able to support their people, support their lifestyle moving forward and be able to sustain that. And really what I want to try to bring home in whatever way I can is they can do that in a career they actually enjoy. And not just, well, I know this career pays a lot of money. I know I'm good at it. I know that's something that I should go into. It's I know I'm good at it. I know it pays a lot of money. And you know what? I really like it. And they can find success and fulfillment, which they also deserve. And that means a lot to me.
We have just a few seconds left for this segment. So what's one thing, and maybe one sentence that you would want to leave our listeners with today who are saying, gosh, I wish I could make the kind of difference that Danielle is making? What would you tell them?
Find your confidence. That's something that held me back a long time. You can do it. Find your confidence.
Danielle, that's wonderful. And it's a perfect way to wrap up this segment. Find your confidence. I want to thank you for sharing your invaluable insights, your history, your career journey, and just shedding light on something that's a very, very important topic. So, Danielle, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, listeners, don't go anywhere. We'll be taking a short break, but when we return, we're going to dive into our second segment with Dawn, where we're going to explore the work that she does around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So stay tuned.
Are you striving to lead your team to success? Or perhaps you're navigating the complexities of the job market. Introducing The Solution, the HR Kyle YouTube channel, your go-to source for insightful guidance and practical tips. With short 1 to 2 minute clips, our videos save you time while delivering impactful, usable strategies. From effective leadership techniques to mastering the job application process, access valuable advice in minutes. Don't miss out. Subscribe to the HR Kyle channel on YouTube today.
Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit hrkyle.com today. Welcome back, everyone, to the HR Kyle podcast. I hope you're feeling refreshed because we're about to embark on our second segment, and trust me, it's going to be just as insightful as the first. Now, in our previous segment, we explored the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion in educational opportunities. Now, shifting gears just slightly, we're joined by Dawn, who will shed light on the significance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in today's work landscape. Dawn is a sought-after speaker on the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and I'm really excited to have her on the show today. Dawn, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's truly an honor to have you on the HR Kyle podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. I'm so glad that you asked me to join.
Absolutely. Well, Dawn, I'm going to start it off easy for you. This will be the easiest question you have. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Dawn Fichter. I'm currently the recruiting director for Lighthouse Pools and Spas, which is actually a fairly new position for me. Prior to that, I have come from third-party recruiting, where I have probably almost a decade, if not longer, within the recruiting realm, done a little bit of everything within that third-party recruiting. So I would say I have a pretty good background in talent acquisition and recruiting for just about any type of company and any type of position you could possibly imagine. That's the great thing about third party is we see a little bit of everything. So, so just been doing that for a while, and throughout my throughout my time doing that, I had a chance to get my master's in human resources management, and I had a chance to really delve into some of the things that talent acquisition touches, and so I just had a chance to really kind of see a lot of things. And I was kind of surprised at some of the stuff that came forward when I was going through my master's and taking some different classes, and some things came to light and some personal experiences. So, kind of led me down this path to where I am now.
Dawn, thank you so much for that introduction about you and who you are. And you've given us a little bit of a taste so far, too, as to what you've done leading up to this point. And obviously, we're going to explore that further. But I've made no secret that the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is extremely important to me. And I'm also very clear as to where that's rooted and how I exercise that passion each day. But for you, where does that passion come from? And where do you feel like you're exercising it each workday?
Oh, that's a good question. And yeah, so I kind of alluded to it in my intro. And so it's funny because when you're in something and you're doing it and you just kind of accept it and you don't really know, and then you get out and you take a little break from it, and then when I got back into it, I realized I really didn't know what I didn't know. And what I mean by that is, so I worked in a third-party staffing agency for about 3 or 4 years, and it was recruiting and staffing for light industrial and office positions all through Northeast Ohio, and predominantly in some very impoverished areas, very uneducated areas, so very entry level folks. And so as I was doing that, I just kind of took it for granted that when somebody would ask me for a candidate with small hands, that I knew that that meant a female, and I was okay with that because I just didn't know that that was not something that we should have accepted. So I worked in that industry for, like I said, 3 to 4 years, and then I took a break. And when I came back to it, I decided I was going to go back and get my master's in HR, HR management. And during that time, I started realizing, like, wow, I've heard that before, or, oh, that may not have been okay, or, oh gosh, when they were describing this, they were actually telling us that they wanted, this, or they didn't want somebody of this particular race. And all of these things that I had seen just started really coming, like I'd have a random thought and, oh my gosh, I just heard this. And so the things that I didn't know that I was really participating in, to be honest with you, started hitting me. And then I got laid off from a job, and I had to go back on the job hunt myself. And that's when my aha moment happened. And I have a sales background, so I was actually looking for different jobs and in sales, recruiting, just kind of putting my feelers out there, seeing what else was out there. And I applied for a job as a pharmaceutical rep. And I'm sure you probably know that, that those are very sought after jobs. They're usually very high, high salaries. You typically have to have a degree. There's a lot of things that they require. There's a very specific, look and kind of feel that they want. However, I had not thought about the fact that I might be somebody that they might not consider the right fit. So I'm going through the process with this company, and I get to the final end, and the recruiter's like, wow, you really have this great background, and I really like talking to you. The hiring managers really liked you. However, you're just a little older than our typical candidate. And I was like, oh, okay. So not realizing at that moment that I was actually being discriminated against, I just went about, my life. And as I'm going through things that hit me, I was like, wow, I got turned down for a job because I was too old. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking about all these moments where somebody asked me for, somebody whose name wasn't hard to pronounce and all these other little things. And it just kind of started coming to me that there is just so much discrimination in the hiring process. And so I wanted everybody to have the same fair chance, to get a job that anybody could have. So that's really where my passion and my aha moment kind of came together. And I was like, wow, I want to do something that can help people not have to, go through the same discriminatory things that I went through. And I'm sure that there was probably more that I missed. I mean, just, looking back now, I can only imagine, how many times, those implicit biases just kind of came out. So while I was getting my master's, I decided for my thesis, I wanted to create a website where I could create tools for hiring managers to actually help stop some of that discrimination. So, not using the words and phrases that we shouldn't use, like seasoned and digital native and, some of these other words that are just, we got so used to using and not realizing where they came from. And then as I did my research and I really put myself out there and I started doing more things and talking to more people and talking to more companies, it shows up in so many places. So, again, I just tried to create some tools and some things that hiring managers could take back that they could use that would work immediately. So you kind of asked where the passion came from. So that's where it came from. And that's kind of how it manifested. And then what I do every day is obviously, I try to make sure that I'm checking myself. And when I'm working with a team, I try to make sure that I'm, participating. And if I hear things that could be potentially discriminatory, that I'm, saying something and I'm making them aware that maybe they aren't even aware that they're doing, and giving them some alternatives and some options. So just kind of pointing out and just making sure that, we're giving as much opportunity to everybody as possible. So I do try to practice it every day, within my talent acquisition practices myself, but then also trying to hold the rest of my team accountable whenever possible. So, I mean, that's really all you can do. So.
That's right. And Don, thank you for again walking us through that, because those of us who this is an important topic for, there is always that aha moment. And then you start looking at it, and just as you've shared, it becomes so illogical. And I think that's what I struggle with the most is when we talk about these topics of discrimination. I just, for the life of me, I can't get my head around it. It doesn't register with me. And something I love that you talk about, and this is a pet peeve of mine, and I try to hold myself accountable to this as well. I want to do a lot less talking about it and a lot less doing something about it. And that's exactly what you said you do. You hold yourself accountable each day, and you hold those around you accountable. And I think those of us who are in positions of influence, such as yourself, such as the roles that I hold, we have a responsibility to hold ourselves accountable and those around us. Now, how do you think your work as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging champion influence your daily work as a talent acquisition leader?
Well, I feel like it makes me open my eyes when I'm looking at things, even as simple as looking through a list of resumes where, 15 years ago or before I even really started, like you said, holding myself accountable, would I have passed by a resume whose name I couldn't pronounce? And now I check myself and I go through and I look at all the different job duties. So it's just the little things that I do now that is that really that day to day, making sure that, I am putting myself in a place where I'm going to be able to give everybody the same opportunities. And I know, from just the things that I've done and the things I've learned and, talking to different people, I know where some of this discrimination, where these things can happen. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm putting policies in place, when I'm actually doing them, and when I'm practicing it, so that I'm, practicing what I preach for the most part. It's not always easy. Sometimes I have to go back and go, okay, you know what? You passed this person by, but what was that really the reason why you passed them by? And just really making sure that I'm, again, holding myself accountable. And again, if I'm on a team where I can do that, I think that's so important. So, and it's just little tweaks here and there that has really made such a huge difference. And then sometimes, it can be even a little bit more than just a little tweak when you're in a third party environment or when you're working with a hiring manager and maybe you're not the decision maker. You might have to be that expert. You might have to be that person that says, hey, when you looked at this, why didn't you like it? Because they have all the skills, they have all this, they have all that. What was it about this particular resume or about this particular candidate? And sometimes when you ask somebody or when you bring it to their attention, they're like, oh, well, I don't even know why. Okay, well, then let's kind of dig a little bit. So it's just, again, making sure that, I don't take the lazy, easy way out and, allow myself to kind of get back into old bad habits, or allow other people to get back into those bad habits, and just making sure that every day when I'm doing it, I'm really trying to adhere to what I know is the best possible practices for everybody that is on the other side of that screen.
As you said, it's starting from a place or a position and having that be really your standard. And as we've talked about, that's become your standard as part of the process. So acknowledging that it's possible and approaching all of this from that standpoint, I think is the best place to start. So, Dawn, you've been working in talent acquisition for over 2 decades, and I just want to make it clear. So I've known Dawn for a lot of those years. She started out extraordinarily young. Let's be clear about that. So I don't want to age either one of us too much, but we've known each other for a while. Where would you say you've seen the profession really evolve and grow relative to being sure that all feel welcome to pursue their dreams and aspirations?
Well, that's a great question. And honestly, I've seen a huge change. I mean, there are conversations being had about hiring and the right and wrong ways to do things that even, 10 years ago would have been like, wow, what are you talking about? I mean, just the simple fact that, 10, 15 years ago when I started in talent acquisition and, I'm taking orders and I'm talking to these hiring managers, we're talking human resources managers, plant managers, high level folks in these organizations that just gave zero thought to saying things like, well, I don't want Hispanic, last names, or I want want to make sure for this role that we don't include women, and just having open conversations like that I don't feel like you're going to hear as much nowadays. I think people are aware more so. So I definitely have seen that change, but I've also seen the conversations about how can we make these more inclusive? What can we do to get more people that are more diverse in our talent pool, and actual companies having these conversations, and really focusing on it. I mean, you've got organizations now that, a lot of your top rated companies in the US, part of it is because they have a more diverse workforce. And, that started with a conversation within their organization that said, hey, we want to make a change to how we both hire people, the people we have on staff, and just our organization in general. And we want to be more inclusive. So the change I've seen is just the open conversation and the open awareness, because I feel like I could have a conversation with a client now and say, well, that's discriminatory. We can't do that. Whereas if I had said that maybe even 10, 15 years ago, they'd be like, well, what do you mean that's discriminatory? This is what we want. So I feel like just the awareness has changed drastically. And I also feel like it's changed more for the candidate side too, where candidates are being more aware of, okay, this is a company that treated me equally. This is a company that I want to work for. And it's also just, statistically shown that the younger generations, Gen Z, your younger millennials, they want to work for companies that are more diverse. DE&I is very important to them. That's something that they seek out in their companies. So I think companies, as they realize that their older baby boomers and some of their older folks that may have been in these old entrenched mindsets are retiring and moving on, these younger folks coming into companies are bringing this fresh idea, these fresh mindsets, because they're just not going to accept it. It's something that, they are just not as okay with coming into companies that have that mindset, and they're looking for that diversity and inclusion. So I've definitely noticed a change in the industry in general when it comes to that on both sides. So, and that's been great to see. I mean, I have conversations with folks now that, I can't even imagine happening, a decade ago. So, definitely some really great things there. And when I talk to companies about what they could do better and we talk about their practices, a lot of them are like, wow, yeah, we just changed the wording in our handbook, or we just took out the pronouns and we made things more inclusive and we were careful about some of our phrasing. And I love hearing that. And again, I just don't think that we would have had those conversations even a decade ago. So I've seen a lot of really great things happening over the last few years, honestly.
No, I agree with you. I've seen the same thing. And I think the biggest part is something you talked about. We've ceased to be afraid to talk about it. We've ceased to be nervous to talk about it or unsure. There's been some really open, frank, and honest conversations. And when you do that around any topic, it over a period of time becomes easier to talk about it. And I think you're exactly right. Having those conversations regularly makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dawn,
we don't know what we don't know,
Precisely. Right. That's exactly right. So, Dawn, you're a sought after speaker on this topic and certainly an advocate in so many ways. What advice, though, would you give to the person who's listening that wants to do more to advocate on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but may not have the confidence to be a speaker like you or be in a leadership position to where they can advocate?
Well, you know what? A lot of times, and most of my career, I have not been a decision maker. I am usually, especially coming in as a third party vendor, we're servicing somebody. We want their business. So you got to be careful, what you say, what you do, where you push. So I would say, honestly, the first place that, if you're passionate about this, or you feel strongly about this, or this is something that you even just want to change, first start with your own practices. First, every day, what can I do better myself? Is there something I'm doing that I can change? You get to the end of the day, did I make sure that I gave everybody a fair shot? And it's not even about, having to be an advocate, in a leadership position. But if somebody says, hey, this person, I didn't really care for them, asking good questions, just making them aware. Well, why didn't you like them? A lot of times colleagues can have conversations with colleagues that are actually more impactful than if a manager or a superior says, oh, well, don't do this. Just asking those good questions and helping them come to their own awareness, I think can be just as powerful. And in a way you're leading, we hear the phrase manage up a lot, and it can be very much like that. You're bringing awareness to the team around you and the group around you. Because again, a lot of times we just don't know that maybe something I said, what could have been taken as a discriminatory comment, or, gosh, I didn't realize that maybe I shouldn't have the word seasoned in that job description. So you can be an advocate and you can be powerful in your workplace, even if you're not in a position of power. And it's all about just raising that awareness, and finding ways that you feel comfortable sharing it with other people. I mean, obviously not everybody has an A-type personality like I do. I've never really had an issue saying how I feel, but I mean, you can still, with your work, your colleagues and the people you work with, you can still ask good questions. You can make good suggestions. There's going to be moments throughout your career where you can advocate, even if you're not, in a point of leadership. But I would say, honestly, the very first place I would tell everybody to look is make sure you're doing what you feel is right. And then, practice what you preach and then go from there. And you'd be surprised how many more people are going to be like, oh, wow, that worked out really well, or I really like that, or you made a really good point. And it can actually lead to you almost having that feeling of leadership and that feeling of, being that advocate within your workplace. So I would say start with yourself, and then just, once you feel like you're doing the right thing, that's just going to shine and that's going to come through.
An awesome advice. And it's the classic, be the change you want to see in the world. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
One final question for you. We've got about 30 seconds, so maybe just in a couple of sentences. Because we could talk about this all night, I know, between the two of us.
Oh, yeah.
But Don, what are some final words of wisdom you'd like to share on the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging?
Well, and you know what? I can keep it short, and I will say this. Start today and just do one thing. Do one thing today. Don't wait, and don't make it a maybe. Do one specific thing every day, and that's the best way. That's the best way to get started. I mean, that's, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And that's how I think you have to approach this. Every day, you just have to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Fantastic advice, and a good way to really sum up our discussion. Dawn, I want to thank you for sharing your invaluable insights on the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. And your expertise is truly enlightening. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun, and you're right. We probably could have gone all evening if we'd had time.
Well, we're going to have to book you for another episode then, I guess, is what we're going to have to do.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So much for having me.
You're very welcome. Folks, that wraps up another enlightening episode of the HR Kyle podcast. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to both Danielle in segment 1 and Dawn here in segment 2 for joining me today and sharing their expertise and passion for creating inclusive environments. I also want to thank each of you for tuning in and spending some time with us. As I say each week, and I mean it each week, your support is always appreciated. But remember, diversity isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about embracing the richness of perspectives and experiences that make our workplaces stronger and more vibrant. As we navigate the complexities of HR and talent acquisition, let's keep championing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging every step of the way. And until next time, this is HR Kyle saying, stay focused, stay grounded, and stay tuned. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com. to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.